So this is lesson 2 for exam 4. So we're going to discuss everything about percents that we can. And so if we look at our objectives, we want to start with the basics of looking at different conversions, different formats, different notations. And then we want to look at equation proportions. And then we want to apply percent increase and decrease to problems. And then we want to look at tax and commission and discount to solve certain problems. So to begin, when we say, what does percent mean? Okay. So when you're thinking of the word percent, we're meaning per 100. Okay, so when we think about an equation, we're thinking about the percentage is per 100, which would be a part out of a whole. And everything that any type of fraction that we want to compare, we can always make it out of 100. So for example, if we say 35%, and I want you to, it's already a percentage. If I want you to change it to a decimal, well, we have to remember that 35% is per 100. So just writing it as it is per 100 takes care of the fraction part. But if we read the fraction correctly, it would be 35 hundredths, which takes care of the decimal part. If I want to change 21 hundredths to a fraction, well, again, if you read the decimal with the correct place value, 21 hundredths is going to be written as such. 149 thousandths would be 149 thousandths, or this is per 100, so it would be 14 9/10 per 100. So again, if you're thinking right here and you're like, wait a minute, how'd you go from here to here? Well, if I divide 1,000 by 10, what do I get? I get 100. If I divide 149 by 10, what do I get? I get 14 9/10. And then last, if I take 1 25 hundredths and change it to a fraction, 1 25 hundredths, or 125 hundredths. If I want to take 1/6 and I want to change it to a percent and a decimal, okay? Well, for one, the long division way, right, is just to go ahead and divide this as it is, okay? And then what you're going to see happen is a repeating decimal, okay, because 6 is a multiple of 3. So even if you type in 1 divided 6 on your calculator, you're going to get 16 hundredths with the 6 hundredths repeating. So how do we write that? Well, basically we see this, right? Over and over and over. So this 6 would round this up to approximately 17 hundredths, which would be 17%. 5/8. Eighths can be, eighths are a multiple of 4, and 4 is a factor of 100. So we know that this one's going to terminate, okay? And remember, if you're going to do this as a decimal, you're trying to think, well, how many times will 8 divide 5? Okay, we've done this before. Okay, so when you take 5 and divide it by 8, eventually you're going to get 625 thousandths. That's going to be a terminating decimal. Now, what would that be as a percentage? Well, if this is our decimal, then 62 5/10 divided by 100 would be the fraction, and so 62 5/10% would be the percentage. And then part C, we've got 1 3/4. So that is really 1 75 hundredths. And so this would be 175 hundredths as a fraction, but it would also be 175%. These are just some common fractions, common percentages, and common decimals that we see. Typically, any type of sales, we're going to see percent off, maybe a half or a third, or these are typically what you see when you're thinking about rolling a die. You're dealing with 1/6. We deal with 1/8. With other types of discounts and whatnot, 10% is very common as well. All right, so if I want you to find the decimal notation of 17%, that would be 17 hundredths. The decimal notation for 130% would be 1 30 hundredths or 1 3/10. If you have 47 hundredths and I want it as a percent, that would be 47%. 3 hundredths would be 3%. The fraction notation of 12 1/2 would be 12 5/10 divided by 100, or I would even take 125 thousandths. Both of those would be correct. And then the fraction form of 110% would be 110 100ths or 11/10. Both of those would be the same because you see what happens. These both divide by 10. So there's some practice. You have some practice links that allow you to practice interchanging from one notation to the other. Second, we're going to look at translating percent problems into proportions and solving those. So here I've got in the United States, there's 20% of the labor force is 55 years or older. Well, the 154 million would be the labor force. So what we're saying is we're going to take 154 million and we want to take 20% of that. Because if we're trying to figure out, well, what's 20% of that, you would want to do that multiplying. And that's why you have your calculator for a lot of this module. So 154 million multiplied by 20%, you're going to get about 3 million. So about 3,080,000. And so on the majority of these slides, you're going to see in red the work that produces the answer there. Okay. Here, we've got different types of, these are going to be some questions that I ask you on your quiz, is different percent problems. And so we can write these as proportions or we can write these as equations. Okay. So 16%, well, that's going to be 16 out of 100. And I want to know out of what? Okay, out of a total of 40, I want to know what's the number. Well, what we've learned previously, how we can solve proportions, remember, is 16 multiplied by 40 and 100, so 100x, and then 16 multiplied by 40, you're going to get 640. And then we're going to divide by 100, so x would be about 6 4/10. 6 4/10 out of 40 is 16%. Or we can write this as an equation. We want to take 16% of 40 is what number? So I want you to see that the 16% is written as a decimal. of 40 to show that it's being multiplied. And then notice that the is represents the equal sign. And then what number are we talking about? There's your x. Okay. So if we multiply and we take 40 and multiply it by 1600ths, we're going to get 6 4/10. It's the same thing we would get if we used a proportion. So let's look at 12% of 50. So 12% is a fraction, would be 12 divided by 100. 50 of 50. So the total is going to be 50. And so you're trying to figure out what's that number out of 50 that's going to be 12%. So again, you can do cross products if you want to. That would be 100x. You would do 12 multiplied by 50. And you would get 600. Divide both sides by 100. X is equal to 6. Now you want to use an equation. We could say 12% of 50 is equal to something. And again, this 12% of 50 would give you 6 when you multiply that out. So 1200ths multiplied by 50 and you get 6. So I don't care which method. This is what we call our equation method. And this would be our proportion method. Either way produces the answer. It's just whatever makes sense to you and which one you want to use. And so that's what I'm talking about here. I use the equation. And then here you can see this is 16 divided by 100 is equal to x divided by 40. And that's what I had in the original. And then you see the 12% of 50 to get an answer. And then of course what you're seeing right here is just 12 divided by 100 is equal to something divided by 50. And then if I want 8.5% of 450, I just want to change 8.5% to a decimal and multiply it by 450 to figure out what is the answer. And that's what you see here. And if I wanted to do a proportion, well, 8.5% would be 8.5 divided by 100 is equal to something out of 450. So if you do the cross products there and solve, you'll get 38 2500ths. Another one where it says what percent of 60. Now we don't know what the percent is. So remember, we're taking a percent of 60 and it is 15. Well, I want to solve for x, so what I'm going to do is divide both sides by 60. And then I would take x is equal, so I would get 15 divided by 60, and I would get 2500ths, which would mean x is equal to 25%. Part B, 414,000 is what percent of 621,000? Well, if I want to solve for x, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 621,000. You can type that in your calculator and you'll get your result. 414,000 divided by 621,000. So we're going to get 6/10 repeating. So that would be about 66, almost 67%. And then we can see part C, what percent of 20, I don't know what percent of 20 is equal to 45, so we divide both sides by 45, and so 45 divided by 20, notice what we're going to get something that's larger than 1, so we get 2 2500ths, which would be the same as 225%. So this should be 225% as an answer. On 14A, I know that 55 is equal to 74% of something. So now I don't know what the total is, but I know that 55 out of something is equal to 74%. And that, translate that, okay? That means that you got 55 points out of a test, but you got a 74% on it. So you're trying to figure out, well, what was your total points if you got 55 out of something to get 74%? Well, that just means we're going to divide both sides by 74 hundredths if I'm using the equation, okay? And so 55 divided by 74 hundredths. So that puts me at about 74 questions. If it was in the context of an exam. 8 2/10% of some number is 328. So 328 is equal to 8 2/10% of something. So you're going to divide both sides by 82 thousandths. So 328 divided by 82 thousandths, and that should be, what, 4,000? So you take 328 divided by 4,000 to check, and you get this is an answer. Well, that would translate to 8 2/10%. So let's say that you wanted to use a proportion on part B. 8 2/10% of 328. Well, we know the total would be 328. I don't know what the part is. What's the part out of the total? But I know that 8 2/10%. And so I would take 8 2/10 and multiply it by 328. And I would get 2,000. 8 2/10 multiplied by 328. And I would get 2,689 6/10. 100 multiplied by x is 100x. So when I divide both sides by 100, this number here slides to the right because it gets smaller. So it'd be 26 896 thousandths. And so that would be our answer if we used a proportion method. Now on part B, if I think I worked part B if I knew the total. Okay, so let me just flip that around. I don't know the total. So let's do 8 2/10 of what number? I don't know the total now. Let's say that the part is 328. So cross products here, that would be 328 multiplied by 100 would be 32,800 is equal to 8 2/10 x. So when we take 32,800 and divide it by 8 2/10, we're going to get 4,000. So use a proportion, or you can use the equation method, but I want you to see that here and here and here represent how you would set it up in a proportion, okay? So here would be 74 divided by 100 is equal to 90 divided by x. Part B would be 8 2/10 divided by 100 is equal to 328 divided by x. So all of these examples that you see, when you see the slash, that just means that's the division bar that would be written like this. So there's some questions, some different practice, and even some videos on different types of equations versus proportions and solving percent proportions and percent problems. The last one is we're going to look at applying different percents, look at percent increase, decrease, look at tax, commission, and discount. So if we say Carrie earns $52,500 in 1 year, but receives an 8% raise, okay? We know that she is going to have more than $52,500, okay? So one way to do this is take $52,500 and multiply it by 8%. But what we have to do is we have to add it to the 52,500. So when you take 52,500 and multiply it by 8% or 8/100ths, you're going to get 4,200. That was the raise. Okay. But if you're looking at a percent problem, understand that she's going to make all of this money. Well, that's 100%. And she got an 8% raise. Well, that's the 4,200. The 100% is the 52,500. Well, when you add those together, you're going to get 56,700. That's her new salary. But also look, if you add 8% and 100%, you're going to get 108%. 108% as a decimal is 1 800. So in the next slide, you're going to see that was this method right here. Is I took 52,500 and multiplied by 1 800ths, and I still get the same answer. One is going to involve multiplying and then adding that piece. That's what's going to happen when you have a tax or you're looking at a raise. It's going to increase your cost or increase your salary. Here, certain restaurants do a 15% tip if you've got several people in your party. So if we take $195 was the total cost without the tip, and we want to take 18% of that. So we're really looking at one way to do this is let's take 18% of 195. But what we're going to end up doing is adding that to 195. So 18% of 195 is about $35.10. Well, understand you're going to pay all of this. You're going to pay that $195. So that is 100% that you're going to pay. But you also paid 18%. So you really paid 118%. And 118% is 1 1800ths. And that's what you'll see in the next slide in red here is $195, which is your total, multiplied by 1 1800ths. Kind of takes care of all of the multiply and then add. It takes care of that, of those steps. I don't care which method you use. If you like the method on the left and you understand how to get there, or if you like the method on the right, doesn't matter, you get to the same answer. It's just whatever makes sense to you. So here we've got a price of a car, and we notice that the price increases by 4%. So if I want to know what's the price increase, then I need to take 36,875, and I'd like for you to change 4% to a decimal, which would be 4/100ths. So when you take 36,875 and multiply it by 4/100ths, you're going to get 1,475. That was the increase. Okay, so that kind of answers this question. Now, what's the new price? Well, the new price would be 36,875 plus the 1,475. So we can get that answer just by adding those two together, and we're going to get 38,350. Okay, or as we see in the next slide, you can multiply the 36,875, which is the car. Notice we multiplied it by 1 400ths because you're getting a 4%. you're getting a 4% increase. You're already paying the $36,875. That's the 100%. We're going to pay all of that, but the price increased by 4%. So we know that we're going to end up paying 104%. And 104% as a decimal would be 1 400, and that's what you see in this equation. So what if it depreciates? Okay, depreciates just means that it's going to decrease in value. Okay, so if I take 36,875, the same price, but I say it decreases by 15%. So I just want to take that 36,875 and multiply it by 15%. So that tells me it's going to decrease in value $5,531.25. So it's going to decrease that much. So that means I would have to take 36,875 and subtract this $5,531.25 to get my new price. Or we can think, well, if it's decreasing by 15%, you're going to pay all of this, right? 36,875, but it's going to depreciate in value 15%. So what you're really seeing is that your value is now 85% of that. That's what the next slide shows, is this 36,875 multiplied by 8,500, because this is 85%. So I can take 15% of 36,875, get an answer, which is this, and subtract it from 36,875. And what I'm going to find is I get this. Next, we want to look at percent increase or percent decrease. Okay, you're going to know when you read the problem, you're going to know if that's going to be a percent increase or a percent decrease, unless I put it in the wording and say, what is the percent increase? Okay, so imagine if I didn't even have this here. Okay, and maybe I said, what's the percent change? Okay. Well, for one, you want to figure out what is the difference in the two prices. The difference would be taking $8.12 and subtract $5.80. Okay, so that's going to give you a start. So $8.12 take away $5.80, you're going to get a price difference of $232. Well, what we want to compare that to is some amount that's a percent, but that percent has to be taken from what it changed from. It changed from $5.80 to $8.12. That is obviously a percent increase. Now, I said that in the wording, what would be the percent increase? So one way to do that is take the difference that you found, which was $2.32 right here, and divide it by $5.80. And what you're going to get is 4/10. Well, what is 4/10 as a percent? That's 40%. Because 4/10 would be something out of 100. Well, that would be 40. So what's the percent increase of the cost of the movie ticket over 10 years? It would be 40%. And so that's what you see in the next slide. I talked about finding the difference in the two. So one method is saying, well, I know that $2.32 is some percent of $5.80. And then what we would do is divide both sides by 580. And so X would be your 40 hundredths, or 40%. And then here's the second method that I talked about was, let's find the $2.32, which was the difference, divided by the original, which is $5.80. And you can think of it as it's going to be some sort of percent change out of 100. So this would be cross products. That would be $5.80 X. Let's just make that X because we're looking for the change, the new percent. And then 2 and 32 hundredths multiplied by 100 would be 232. And when you take 232 and divide it by 5 8/10, it's going to take you directly to what the percentage is because you made it a proportion. You put it divided by 100. So it does. It takes you directly to that percent value. Here's your definition for percent change. It's the amount of change divided by the original amount. That's typically where the errors come from, is what you're dividing by. So when we come back to this problem here, a lot of times the error comes not in finding the difference, but dividing by 812 when you should have divided by 500 or $5.80. Person goes on a diet and goes from a weight of 160 pounds to a weight of 136. That's obviously a percent decrease. So you can find the difference. So 160 take away 136. Okay, when you find that difference, that's going to be 24. That's going to be divided by the original amount of weight, which was 160. So when you do is you're going to get 15 hundredths, and 15 hundredths as a percent would be 15%. Now, if you want to use a proportion, you know that you're looking at some sort of percent out of 100, but you've got to find the difference, which would be the 24 divided by the original, which would be 160. Well, 160 multiplied by X is 160X. 24 times 100 is 2400. And if we take 2400 on your calculator and divide it by 160, it's going to take you directly to the percent because you get 15 as an answer, which means your answer was 15%. So here's your two methods. Choose which method makes sense to you, how you want to do that. Method 2, over here, notice that the 24, that's your difference. And that difference is equal to some percent out of the original weight. And so we're going to divide both sides by 160. And you see you get 24 divided by 160. Well, you get that over here as well. Okay, we have 74 cities in the world population. Had populations of 1 million or more in 1950. Well, now 2010. Okay, we've got 60 years later, we've got 442 cities that have that. So if we're looking for the percent change, or that increase, well, here's where you're finding your difference. So 442 take away 74 is 368. Now, where did we start from? Well, we started with 74 because that was in 1950. So that's why we're dividing by 74 there. And when you do that, you're going to get something that's larger than 1, right? 368 divided by 74. And you're going to get about 4 97 hundredths. Well, that's a decimal. What's the percent of that? Well, to change from the decimal to percent would be 497%, almost 500% increase over 60 years. Method 2 is just find the difference. So you would say, well, the difference is the same as if I took a percent of the original. So when you divide both sides by 74, notice you're getting the same process there, same result. When you're talking about sales tax, okay, this is just something that I Googled recently. Sales tax for Bentonville is 9 5/10%, Fayetteville 9 7/500. Sometimes that fluctuates a little bit, but if you're talking about sales tax, you got to think about what's being added to your total bill, and there's a percent of your total bill. So for instance, the sales tax on a purchase item of an e-reader that cost $199 is $13.93. What's the sales tax rate? So if I have $199 e-reader, the sales tax of that is $13.93. So if I take $199, I'm going to divide both sides by $199. So I'm going to take $13.93 and divide it by 199. And what you're going to see is you're going to get 7/100, which would mean that that would be a 7% sales tax rate. And that's what you should see in the next slide there. My sales tax was $13.93. I knew that there was some sales tax rate. Notice that the rate can be changed to a decimal, which can be changed to a fraction, which could look as a percent as well. So when you divide both sides by 199, you're going to get the 7/100 or the 7%. Here, the sales tax on the purchase of a stone fire pit is $12.75. That's the sales tax. And the sales rate was 8%. Find the purchase price. Okay, I'm just figuring out what's the purchase price before all this happened. That's what this number is going to represent. So I would just divide both sides by 8/100. So you would take $12.75 in your calculator divided by 8/100, and that will give you about $159.38 would be what the original purchase price was. And then the $12.75, that's just the sales tax. Now remember, that tax has to be added on. Okay. So again, there's your sales tax is equal to the rate multiplied by the price. We actually knew the sales tax, it was $12.75. And we knew the tax rate. And so we're just trying to figure out what's the price, which would be X. So we divide both sides by 8/100, and it gives us this value of $159.38, which is what we found here. So with this one, we got sales tax of designer jeans is $4.84, and the sales tax rate is 5.5%. So remember, 5.5% changed to a fraction would be 55/100, right? Or 5 5/10 divided by 100. Okay, so when you take 100, 5 5/10 divided by 100, you're actually going to get 55 thousandths. So that is your sales tax rate. We're just trying to figure out the final purchase price before the tax was added. So we would divide both sides by 55 thousandths. X is equal to, so you would type in $4.84, that is your sales tax, divided by 55 thousandths, and you're going to get $88. That was the purchase price before we took into consideration what the sales tax would be. So understand that, and eventually we would take the $88 and add the sales tax to get a final price. Okay, and so that's what I'm talking about here, and kind of go through the steps using an equation to do that. Again, here's sales tax on a purchased set of equipment is $449. Sorry, I wrote that incorrectly. The sales tax on the purchase of a technology equipment that costs this is this. So $26.94, that's the sales tax. I want to know what the sales tax rate is. What would be that percent? Well, that would be something multiplied by what the final price would be. So the technology, excuse me, not the final price, but what the price of the technology equipment is currently would be $449. If I'm going to have sales tax of $26.94, I'm just trying to figure out what's the percent. So I would divide $26.94 by 449. So you would type in $26.94 divided by 449, and you would get 600ths, which means that's the decimal, right? Which would be 600ths or 6%. And that's what I talk about in this slide of how to find that value. Then you can look at commission. Okay, commission is just something that you're adding extra amount, and typically that's a percentage of what you've earned. So you can increase a salary of some sort. So if this person, the salesperson, has a commission rate of 3%, then what's the commission on the sale of $8,300 worth of fitness membership? So what we're going to find is we're looking for the commission. And we know that there's a rate and then there's a price. Okay, well, the rate is 3%. 3% is the same as 300ths. The price would be $8,300. X would be our commission. So when we multiply that, we see in the next slide, when we multiply that, we get that salesperson actually gets $249. George earns commission of $20,800 selling this much worth. We're trying to figure out the rate. So George earns $20,800 in commission. I don't know what the rate is, but he sold $320,000 worth of moving equipment. Well, if you want to solve for X, you're going to divide both sides by 320,000, excuse me. So you would type into your calculator 20,800 divided by 320,000, and you would find you would get 65 thousandths. But remember, that's the decimal form, which 65 thousandths is the same as 65 thousandths, but if you wanted to change that to 100, that would have to be 6 5/10%. Okay, Charlotte's commission rate is 7.5%. She received a commission of this. How many dollars did she sell? Well, here's her commission, $2,970. That's your commission. We know the rate is 7.5%, which would be 7.5 out of 100, okay, which would be 75 thousandths. Because remember, if you wanted to make this out of thousandths, you would multiply 7.5 by 10, you'd multiply 100 by 10, so that would give you 75 thousandths, which is equivalent to this decimal. But I don't know what the total amount of the ski passes was worth. So you're going to divide both sides by 75 thousandths. And that's what you'll see in the next slide. When you do that division, you find that the total amount of ski passes was 39,600. If I want to look for discount, okay, sofa is marked as 2,379 is on sale for 30% off. What's the discount? What's the sale price? Okay, so if it's 30% off, you're going to look at a couple of methods here. If it's 30% off, the method 2 that I have here, if it's 30% off, you're not paying the full 100%. You're actually paying 100%, take away 30%, which is 70%. So 70% as a decimal is 70 hundredths. So if you take the sofa, what it's marked, and take 70% of it, then what we see is the discount or the sales price. So the discounted price is the $1,665.30. Now, another way to do this, for you see in this method right here, is to take the rate of the discount, which is 30%. So notice that's here. The original amount was $2,379. We're going to multiply that. We're going to get $713.70. That is the discount. But notice it had to be subtracted because you're trying to figure out the price. So I don't care which method, method 1 or method 2, to find that discounted rate. A computer marked at $660 is on sale for 15% off. We're trying to figure out the discount. So I don't know what the discount is, but I know that 15% off would be 15 hundredths. Okay. So that would help you determine what the discount would be. So you would take 660, multiply it by 15 hundredths. And so you would find that to be almost $100. So it would be $99. That's the discounted price. But remember, you would have to take 600 and subtract 99 from it, okay? So when you take 660 and subtract 99, roughly $100, you're going to get $561 as your final price. Or you can think, well, it's $660 and I'm getting 15% off, which means I'm only paying 85%. So if you take 660 and multiply it by 85 hundredths, you're going to get $561 as your answer. So that's what you see in the next slide. Method 2 is where I took the 100%, take away 15% to get the 85%. And then over here was just method 1, where I had to multiply, get the $99 and subtract it to find the sales price. And then final problem, find the discount and the rate of discount for the pinball machine. So what you have is that it was $3,999. And what we know, it's now being sold for $3,150. Okay, so we're just trying to figure out, well, what would that rate be? Okay, so one of this, the 3,200 here is equal to that some type of rate multiplied by 3,999. So we're going to divide both sides by 3,999 to get this 80%, okay? So really, it's 80% paid, but it's really 20% that was taken off. So if you're only if you're paying, if it was almost $4,000 and now you're paying $3,200, then what you're finding is, well, our answer is 80% of this. 3,200 is 80% of the 3,999, which means you had a 20% discount. Okay, so you can kind of think about that again. The 3,200 divided by 3,999, you get this amount here when you do this division. Okay. So if you took 3,999 and multiplied it by 20%, you're going to get about $799.80. Okay, well, if you take the 3,999, take away $799, you're roughly getting $3,200 as your amount. So that tells us that it was a 20% discount. Here's some different links that you can look at for practice on increase, decrease. If you need some practice on sales tax or markup, try the different links here. You've got some different videos. And then the same for commission, different video practice and different links to actually give you some problems to practice. So I hope that was helpful for lesson 2 for your 4th exam, everything about percent notation.